sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that you just can't wait to swipe super like. I'm Christy Powell. I'm joined tonight by one of my favorite right swipes, Serafina Smith.
Why, thank you. Hello.
And not a moment too soon, we are joined again by Grace Wood to walk us through the perils of young love during a global quarantine. Grace, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me again. I'm excited.
We are chewing bubblegum and taking your calls, and we are all out of bubblegum, so hit us up, 512-991-9242.
All right, well, we got some tech stuff to work out with Serafina, but we would love to take your calls. We're at 512-991-9242, or you can call the show by going to tinycc/callsex, because the show is starting right now.
Hi.
Hey, Serafina's in.
Wasn't that a great intro I just gave?
Yeah. I'm going to give you a moment to get the echo worked out with our tech crew while we go ahead and jump into things. So, Grace, let's start by recognizing that everyone's quarantine bubble needs, their circumstances, they're all totally different. Nobody knows how to deal with this whole thing. People are in different circumstances all over the world. There's no specific rule that we could give as non-medical professionals to our audience about how to know what's safe or how to manage risks. What kind of ideas come to mind? I mean, what do you recommend to help people just navigate all of this?
Yeah. I think that the most important thing is just to know your own boundaries and what feels comfortable to you, and not to try to push yourself outside of that, for the sake of meeting someone else, just because that's going to create some anxiety already. And dating is a nerve-wracking thing anywho.
Yeah, well, when people are just starting to date right now, how do they have those conversations about those boundaries? How do you know what feels good to you and what feels safe? And then how do you share that with your partner who is a total stranger? I mean, I imagine there's a lot of posturing going on.
Sure. Yeah, I think it can be an awkward conversation to have. You don't know how much exposure someone else is getting, or if they're out going to parties, or they don't know if you're going out to parties. So just being really upfront from the get-go of, this is what my quarantine procedure has looked like, or these are the things that I put in place. And as far as determining those, that's really about what feels safe to you, because like you're saying, there's a lot of mixed messages about what's safe and what's not safe. So checking in with yourself and going, okay, does this feel safe for me and where I'm at and for the people that I'm in contact with? Just asking yourself those tough questions and being really clear about communicating those with the people that you're talking to.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess that's all assuming you even get to that first date or to that place where this is a relationship where you are, I guess, excited enough about to take a calculated risk.
Right.
Before that point, I mean, how are people meeting right now? How are people dating? Online dating isn't exactly new, but it's got to be different in this weird world.
Yeah, when it's necessary, that's new.
Yeah, it stops being like an extra little bonus opportunity, and when it becomes like your only avenue, traffic gets a little clogged up.
Right. Most people don't have the option of going to a bar and just meeting someone, or even talking to coworkers at work, or whatever it might be. So I'm trying to think back what your original question was there.
Well, just what kind of dates are people even going on, or how are they even meeting before they go on these dates?
I want to know
Yeah.
this, because I don't know how to freaking go out on a date right now.
Yeah, for real.
I know. Yeah, I think the FaceTime dates are becoming bigger and bigger. At the beginning of quarantine, it was kind of weird. I had certainly never been on a FaceTime date with someone before I met them, or even talk to anyone on the phone before I met them.
Yeah.
That seemed kind of like, whoa, you're asking a lot of me to talk on the phone before we've even met. But, then all of a sudden it was COVID and people couldn't meet in person anymore. And this idea of the FaceTime date is becoming more and more normal. And I think it's something that's going to stick around even after, hopefully, life goes back to normal.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the whole concept of normal feels more unrealistic than any of the other things that we're discussing here. So, yeah, I guess it makes sense to imagine that a FaceTime date will continue. Do you have any tips for just how to get past that initial awkwardness? I mean, this is like a totally new way of dating, and dating is kind of scary enough.
It is scary enough. It's always scary. I would be hard pressed to look back at a point in time where people would go, "Oh, dating, that's easy. No trouble at all."
Sure.
It's always tricky. It's always vulnerable. And the FaceTime date thing, it's gonna feel kind of awkward, but just like with everything, we have to be open-minded and adapt. And I think it's one of those things, just keep in mind that we are adaptable creatures. Mm-hmm. And, it's gonna feel weird at first, and that's okay. It's probably feeling weird for the other person too. And so you immediately have that little bit of bonding of, ooh, this is kind of weird. Haven't done this before. I'm not sure what I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Something in common right away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of nice. You can be at the comfort of your couch and have your animals there. You get to meet other people's animals on a first meeting. Usually that doesn't happen unless things go really well.
Well, and I think I really like the idea of it being a somewhat lower barrier to entry. Obviously people can still get in their heads. There's still plenty of opportunity for anxiety. And if you're watching this right now and you're thinking that the idea of going on more than one FaceTime date in a day would just destroy you because of your energy levels and everything else, that's cool. I totally get that. But I do like that you don't necessarily have to get all dressed up. You don't necessarily have to drive across town just for this first date, because I feel like I'm always encouraging people to actually meet face to face, to start talking and to jump into some idea of normalcy when we're talking about online dating, because there is such a temptation, I think, to just text for weeks on end until you've built up this idea of somebody that doesn't line up with who they actually are when you do start talking. I don't know. Right. Do you think that this is kind of changing the way that people interact in, more than just the modality, but in sort of the depth of it?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the nice things about it is that it's safe. And normally going on a first date with someone, there's always, especially if you're a woman, that little bit of a sense of, is this person going to be okay? Are they safe to be around? And with the FaceTime date, you're getting more information than if you're just texting. You're getting more information about how they talk and what kind of facial expressions they make. And, a sense of humor can come across a lot easier than it can over a text message. And you're also getting an idea for their space and how they live and what feels comfortable to them. So I think you get a lot more visual and audio cues about a person through doing that FaceTime date than you would over text. It's still not as much as you're going to be getting if you were actually in person, but it's kind of a nice segue where you can gauge, okay, does this person feel safe to me?
Yeah, you may not feel comfortable answering this, and that's all right. Just go ahead and nod yes if it's totally okay to screen capture somebody's your conversation, and then zoom in to look at their bookshelf and figure out who somebody is. I'll take that as a yes. Okay, yeah, for the podcast audience, we're good.
Do not try this at home, kids.
Well, it is just strange inviting somebody into your home in this digital way. And I'm not trying to demonize it, but I just recognize that all of this is new. And I imagine that has everybody's anxiety kind of at high alert. So I appreciate, anything that can help ease into that.
Oh, it just occurred to me that, flags and towels and curtains and stuff are the new, like, black tie and dress.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, making the space behind you, like Gray said, you can tell a lot of folks just about sort of how they approach this. Like, are they carrying the phone around while they're cooking and sort of like talking at you? Or are they like seated at like an office desk? And the vibe of that feels very different.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And it can be anything you want it to be. You can both be drinking a glass of wine. You can be sitting there watching a TV show together. It can be whatever kind of date you want it to be, except you're both in the comfort of your own homes.
Yeah. So there's something to embrace there. Well, I want to mention that this conversation started because of a blog that you had written. And we've got links to that and everything on the show notes to this episode. I hope that folks will give it a look. But you list a number of tips, starting with be flexible. How do you, embrace and sort of like lean into the weirdness of all of this when, dating is such like an anxious process anyway?
Yeah. I think acknowledging it with the other person helps a lot, just to put out there, this is kind of weird, huh? To start from there. And then also to acknowledge that this is a really fucking weird time anyway.
To just be a human. Yeah, regardless of what you're trying to do. Anxieties
are high. And, I think I heard someone call it the COVID coaster the other day, which I thought was so fitting.
Oh, wow.
Everybody's emotions are just really high, really low, really high, really low. And it's kind of like we're trying to date in the midst of an apocalypse. That's how it feels sometimes.
Oh, yeah, kind of.
Hopeful that it's not an apocalypse, but, it feels that way at times. So acknowledging that too, and just really being upfront and honest with yourself about what you're feeling, and throwing that out there so the other person is clear about that too. Because I think it is a bonding thing for a lot of people. Pretty much everyone is feeling this weirdness.
I hear that. I appreciate like the universality of it. I guess my anxiety, and maybe this is just telling, but my fear is that I'll sort of end up in a position where I'm like, yeah, let's lean into it. Like, it's okay to be, that it's weird. Like, let's be flexible. And then I have these like situation where I'm sort of doing all the emotional labor and kind of carrying somebody through that. I imagine people are reacting to this thing in very different ways and on different levels.
Yeah.
So how does it start though? Like, how does that initial connection gonna be really made? Like, I'm in my day, back in my time.
And more tech issues. All right, we'll get all of that sorted out with Sarah. I'm actually very, very curious where she was going with that.
Me too. Now we can find out.
Yeah. Will you? Oh, yeah, Sarah, please. Are you here with us?
As soon as I start talking, it goes. Okay, I'm gonna try this one more time. So, don't know where we left off, but so yeah, how's that connection made? Because like, I want to talk to people, sure, but like in normal day-to-day life, there are situations that feel more private, where it's easier to like say things, where it's more appropriate to say, hey, would you like to do this and such? But that doesn't really seem like it happens in my world now. And like, we used to just, we'd make back in my day, we'd make those tapes that for the dating service, and like, hello, I love puppies. I just love them. And if you also love puppies, you can call us at 512-991-9242. In fact, any of you can call us because we have no calls right now. So if you would, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it does point out the fact that dating has changed and it's been weird kind of for every generation.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think with that initial connection with online dating, it's always kind of weird. You're going based off of a few pictures and a short bio, and you're really just both saying, yeah, I guess I find you attractive enough.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. It's a wild, wild world out there, and we're all just kind of navigating it together. So I guess lean into FaceTime and try to be flexible, try to deal with the weirdness of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Sarah, we've got an email I was hoping you could read out for us about these exact ideas.
Absolutely. Our email reads, Hi, Secular Sexuality. I left religion about 2 years ago. I grew up in an extremely religious community. I left religion about 2 years ago, and I'm close to being 30 years old. The majority of my life, I was sexually inactive and would refrain from it because that's what my religion told me to do. After leaving religion, I felt so out of place. I don't know how to navigate the dating and sex field. While most of the people around me have started their sexual journey around their early 20s and late teens, I'm starting close to my 30s. I feel like I've got a lot of ground to catch up on. For the past year, I've been using dating apps and have had poor results. I've had a couple of experiences outside of dating apps. Of course, with the pandemic, I'm not going out to bars anymore. I'm not a virgin anymore, but still I have a limited amount of experience. Honestly, I just want to move on and have fun in my sexual life for now, but it seems difficult since I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I'd say that I'm just about recovered from religion except for this small part of my life. It certainly kills my outlook on life when I keep getting shut down solely, I feel, because I lack the experience to read the social dating norms of verbal and body language. How can I get past this?
Yeah, I love that letter so much because it almost sounds like something that we wrote in the laboratory as like a softball to just hit down the middle because I mean this really hits on everything that I wanted to talk about today. Just
You wrote
the
this, didn't you?
yeah, well, I have evidence. I will not share it with you. Because it just hits on everything I wanted to talk about today. The fact that this crisis is hitting every age range very differently, but so does religion, and we're all kind of dealing with coming out of religion and coming through this crisis in these different ways. And a huge part of secular sexuality is just the fact that so many people in the atheist community are coming from situations where they were never taught how to date. They were never taught how to go to a strip club or how to talk to a cam girl or any of these things that are perfectly healthy, happy, and wonderful things to be participating in. So I don't mean to set the expectations too high, Grace, but I'd love to kind of hear what your insight is for all of this.
Tell us the answer, Grace.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that came to mind for me, and I jotted it down real quick, is that nobody knows what they're doing. And I think that's really important to keep in mind because it's so easy to feel like everybody knows what they're doing but me. Everybody has it together but me. And I totally get that feeling. And even people who have had tons and tons and tons of sex might have no idea what they're doing as far as sex goes. Because the most important thing with sex is that you're communicating about it and asking about it and being open about it. And so as long as you're doing that, you're doing a great job because nobody knows what they're doing. And there's only one way to figure that stuff out, by asking.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like we have this sort of cultural narrative of the great lover, of the smooth operator or however you want to frame it. And I mean, it's not completely baseless, but the best lovers are just the people who are able to communicate, who are able to follow along, whether with verbal or nonverbal cues. But it's all about learning each partner. And so nobody is going to be good at having sex in a certain way until they have the opportunity to kind of learn from you and learn with you. And that's true universally, whether you're a great lover or a bad lover, it's more about communication. I don't know. I'm perhaps being a little hyperbolic, but how does that resonate to y'all?
I mean, in a way, it's the playing field is more level now because everyone gets to start off on a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a new world for all of us, and we know that, and we know when you're looking at the next person, yeah, this is messing with them too. So it's I feel like it's not the same sort of worry about security or inadequacy at the beginning of things because we're all just it's much easier to see that we're all just making shit up as we go.
No,
Yeah.
it's a fair point. Like all your dating strategies around, ladies love it when I first take them to like this coffee shop, and then they're always impressed. And there's a puppy store nearby. I didn't plan that. Like, I don't know. Is that what the perfect date would be? How the hell would I know? But I'm just thinking of sort of these scripts and routines that people often use in dating. We're all operating from new scripts right now. We're all figuring this out.
Mm-hmm. And also when it comes to sex, everybody's bodies are different. Even if somebody told you had the best sex ever, that might be horrible to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of room. Like I hear the writer's anxiety, and I recognize where that's coming from. And, I might suggest that you feel anxious not because you aren't good at this, but because you haven't done it. And those two can look the same, and you can assume that because you haven't done it, that you're not good at it. But I don't necessarily know that that's true. If you are approaching the idea of dating, the idea of connecting with somebody in a kind and generous way, you may put your foot in your mouth more often than somebody who has more experience, but I don't even know that that's true.
Well, do you want to take a call now and we can get back to this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we've got Brutus on the line. Brutus, can you hear us? Hello.
Oh, whoa! I'm already in. That
Yeah.
was surprising.
Welcome.
I just went straight from talking to the person to just right here, like, boop, you're in, slap you on the ass, and hop in. But,
that's how we work around here.
But yeah, I figured out a few interesting things while dating under COVID. For one, actually, I kind of got a surge in just like dates and stuff. And I feel a little douchey for this, but pretty much all of my first dates have been just at my house. But like,
yeah, so the boundaries that you've been holding, or kind of the way you've been going about this, is by just going ahead and having people over and trying to keep it just the two of you.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. Hello.
Yeah, are you hearing us?
Yep, my my Bluetooth headphones just grabbed my phone out of nowhere.
Well, fair enough. I guess I just wanted to understand that basically through this whole situation, you've been, staying safe in other places, but have been allowing people to come over and are now, I don't know, dealing with some anxiety or maybe feelings of guilt around that.
Yeah, I feel like I should be like a little more romantic, but at the same time, it's like, because my house is kind of like my sanctuary and a place that I'm comfortable in, I feel like first dates go much better when they're just straight away at my house, though that could also just be because someone who's willing to come to my house right away is already pretty invested. I will say this, though, as a very physical person, one thing that has probably freaked me out, well, not freaked me out, but made me more anxious than it probably should have, is I'm used to having sex or making out on a first date, and a lot of the time when it doesn't pan out that way, I usually never see the person again. I think part of that is just I'm very physical, so if that chemistry is there, stuff usually explodes pretty quickly.
Well, I want to make sure we're not getting too far afield. Do you feel as if the COVID and just sort of the pressure that it puts on the types of dates you're able to have and these kinds of things is sort of impacting the way that you interact with folks?
Yeah, and one thing that sucks too is it's like before COVID, I could just date willy-nilly, and if a date totally sucked, big deal. Or if I turned out that I didn't really like the person that much, or then somebody better came along, that would be basically what would happen. But now I have to think ahead, because now it's like I have to wait 2 weeks now before I can see the other person. So,
yeah, it changes that risk level a little bit. It's kind of what we were talking about earlier. Like before you even get to that first date, like how do you choose who to spend that coin on? Because the risk, the investment's a little higher. Yeah.
And it's like, and like with my date the other night, like I spent like $40 on, I spent like 40 or $50 on sushi. And like, and yeah, the date overall went pretty well, though I still have some anxieties because nothing happened. And even though she told me she liked me, I always feel like I did something wrong, or I could have done something better. But luckily I plan on just seeing her again next week and if she does want to see me next week, then that means that she does like me and I have nothing to worry about. But yeah, it's just like for one, there is that pressure that you want the person to like you, and that hasn't been the big problem. The big problem has just been it's just been picking out, and then how does that affect the rest of your week? Like I mentioned last time I called, like if I have somebody over, all of a sudden my family has to know that I was seeing somebody. And I had that.
Privacy's really at a premium right now.
Yeah. And like on one hand, you start to kind of appreciate just physically being around somebody. And I'm a very, like I've said, I'm a very physical person. That's usually how I display intimacy, whether it's romantic or with an animal or with a family member or something. I'm the guy who gets drunk and bear hugs everybody. With their consent, of course. But
yeah, this is a pretty touch-starved time. So I guess I hear all of the pieces that you're coping with here. Like there's more pressure on a date. There's a little that adds a little bit of anxiety. Did it go well? Is it okay? And there's like a sense of need for it. You have so few opportunities for connection. It just mounts and mounts and mounts because you're looking for some physical touch. You're looking for some intimacy, and you have so few outlets for it. So yeah, I can imagine that creates a lot of strain on a new relationship. Grace, is there any tips that you can offer on how to, kind of just adapt to that, or maybe look out for that extra stress?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Brutus?
I guess one thing is 2 weeks is both longer and shorter amount of is both a longer and shorter amount of time than you think it is. So it's not the end of the world.
Especially now.
On a date and you don't really like the person. And you can sit and binge watch Netflix for another 2 weeks. Maybe if you're really on the fence, like I had to do this and I ended up not liking the person, but I will sometimes FaceTime somebody if I'm wondering. But it's also very easy to see somebody through rose-tinted glasses because you just
because you're not really there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think some of the stuff that we're going to get to too is different ways. having someone at your house, I totally get that comfort there and the ease that comes with that. And at the same time, it's tough having to wait 2 weeks before seeing anyone else, just trying to be extra cautious about things. So some of the stuff I was going to bring up later is like the alternatives to, having someone over at your house. Alternatives where you can keep 6 foot distance and both have masks on and feel, that feels a little bit safer, at least for me. And again, everybody needs to set their own boundaries when it comes to what feels safe to them. But some people might feel more comfortable with that than having someone over at their house, because you might not have to wait a full 2 weeks to meet someone else if you're doing it in that socially distant way.
Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah, so Brutus, I appreciate your call. I'm going to give Grace an opportunity to kind of walk us through some of those alternatives. But yeah, this is a stressful time, and I appreciate you kind of laying out how multi-layered that can be, because this does impact dating in so many different ways. And I think that it can be really easy to just sort of write it off like in sort of a broad category. Yeah, sure, it makes dating harder. But when you actually examine it and you start to recognize that, oh, okay, well, it's not just where do we meet, it's now how do we get to know each other? And okay, now we have known each other for a while and maybe we want to get physically intimate, but there are other people in the house and nobody ever fucking leaves. You never get the house like to yourself. And like these things just can stack up. And you go from somebody who, wants to be out in the dating scene and is willing to put some effort into it, to now being somebody who's like, ugh, there's just too many steps. There's just too much to cope with.
It's a different world.
Yeah. It is a different world. Yeah. But so some of those alternatives to, how to date, where to date, going for a walk is kind of the obvious number one. And it's tough right now, especially if you're in Central Texas.
Where it is just super August, y'all. It is very August here. It's so August.
Yeah. But if you're a morning person, you can wake up and go for a walk with someone first thing in the morning, maybe grab some coffee to go, walk along and drink coffees together. It can be kind of nice. Just from a safety point of view, I wouldn't recommend meeting a stranger for a walk at nighttime, but
know your surroundings. I mean, there is that need to, I think, keep your normal checklist in mind, but then just add to it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can set up picnics. I've seen a lot of people doing this where they meet someone for a little picnic. You both can bring your own food, sit at opposite ends of the blanket and have a conversation and eat. You can even go for a swim together.
Mm-hmm.
Some places, depending on where you are and if you feel like that's safe. You can go for a bike ride. This is a great time if you're a physically active person.
No, I mean, you're not wrong. My partner and I just, we had to murder 20 people, but we were able to buy some kayaks. And apparently we weren't the only people with that idea. And, now 20 of them are dead. But yeah, it's great to be getting out into the world and having a date. But yeah, you got to be willing to make it work, to figure out what fits.
Right. Be flexible.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings us on down, I guess, to the third point on your list, which was just recognize your feelings. I'm curious what you mean here.
Yeah. Recognize your feelings. This is a tip for dating anytime, anywhere, especially right now, because it's like, okay, are you dating because you're feeling really lonely? There's a lot of loneliness right now, and that's understandable. So, are you looking for a connection with someone just as friends? Are you looking for a relationship? What kind of relationship are you looking for? This is a great time to really ask yourself those questions. Ask yourself what you want in a partner and what you want a relationship to look like, because things are moving slowly sometimes and fast other times. But it's a great time to just sit back and explore what you want and what you need, and to practice communicating that with other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth reminding people, I think, about the episode we did with Annette James a couple of months ago about how your feelings can just sneak up on you during this time. When you're not feeling especially grounded and you're being exposed to more stresses than you're used to, but definitely different stresses, ones that you haven't already developed sort of a barometer for. Now they can really overwhelm you, often without even noticing that that's going on.
Yes.
Definitely. Sneaky emotions.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, if they're not around as much, you don't notice it as much because you're not getting that stimulation as often, and so it's just tickling you. It's just.
Well, and we tend to have these little hallmarks in our life. We tend to know when we get into our car every single day at 7:45 whether or not we're going to be tired for the rest of the day, because we get into the car every day at 7:45, and we can use that as sort of a testing site to know what our tiredness is. And I'm just using one example here, but there are so many things like that that are built into our standard routines. And now that our routines have all just been thrown into total chaos, or at the same time, or for different people, put into such tight boxes where the routine is just so repetitive as to not even be noticeable, the little changes in our body, little changes in our nervous system and in our mood and in our mind, they can be really easy to miss.
Right. Especially being in one place for so much of the time, just being in your little bubble that you're existing in and not getting that exposure to the outside world.
Yeah. Well, we've hit on this a couple of times in some different ways, but one of the really annoying pieces of advice that I like to just bother people with is to take a page from the poly playbook when it comes to dating, because poly folks, in my experience, or if I can speak broadly, often have this sort of like date zero concept where that what we might otherwise call a first date isn't really a date. Like, they're not even necessarily there to, quote, have a good time, so much as to just like go through a checklist of, are you right for me? Are you somebody worth me investigating in? Do we line up? Are my like poly folks will oftentimes say, this is my relationship orientation. This is the space I have in my life. This is the relationship dynamic that I'm looking for. These are my values. These are, all of these different adjectives. And outside of that, monogamous folks aren't necessarily in that same habit. So anyway, I didn't mean to lecture there on polyamory, but I feel like there's a lot of utility in having that type of conversation really early on, and not getting, like we said, too invested in a text message conversation or in a relationship that hasn't checked off certain boxes. How is that changing when you can't just go out and meet somebody for a date? When, like we were talking with Brutus, you do have that 2-week waiting period, and you have to kind of save that coin up and spend it more wisely.
Well, that just means date zero can be, by text, and then you move on when you've moved on because you've moved to a different format.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Yeah, I think it's even more important to have those conversations right now, and also to be okay with saying, I don't know, right? But, in that conversation of, okay, what is this? What does this mean? Where are we going? What do we both want? It's okay to say, I don't know, especially if you haven't met the person yet, or if you haven't met them in person. It's okay to say, I don't know, but I am interested in continuing to get to know you. I think it's also something that I've been noticing is just this, like, the importance of communicating where you're at with each other when it's so easy for there to be misunderstandings and for you to be on completely different pages, you know, because I've seen some instances of people getting into these relationships, and it's just by text, maybe the occasional phone call, and it's getting really intense. And the people are relying on each other because this is an intense time, you know, and you, when you find that connection, it's natural to want to kind of latch on and continue talking with that person. But you might be on two totally different pages, you know, where one person is like, great, we're talking, we're getting to know each other. And the other person is like, we're in a relationship, you know, so being really open and communicating that, I think is really especially important even now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it raises a good point, because I don't mean to make it sound as if long distance relationships or relationships that only exist online or through text message, that they aren't valid. They certainly are. There are great opportunities to have entire relationships that are incredibly meaningful strictly through text or strictly through email. But I feel like when people are navigating the sort of kink spaces that function that way, or when they're navigating a long distance relationship, it's very explicit, right? Like everybody is having those conversations that you're talking about, where we identify, you know, what is it that you're looking for and what is okay.
All the people involved need to know what page you're on.
Well, your fourth point was to make sure to reach out to other supports in your life. And you write about making sure that you're involving family and you're staying close to your friends. And I guess I'm just curious how your relationship with your mom factors into your dating life, or how these other supports, like how they become relevant.
Well, as therapists, we know how your relationship with your mom can factor into your relationship. But
I just teed that one right up for you.
No, but
if it's not one thing, it's your mother.
I think, you know, that with all of this, we, like we're saying, emotions are high. We're lonely as heck, you know, as a population right now. I think humans are struggling with that. And if you're looking for romantic relationships to fulfill that need, to cure that loneliness, that's immediately putting a lot of pressure on this relationship to fulfill this huge need. And the way I think about it, you know, we have a need for human connection, and romantic relationships just fill one small piece of that. And yeah, so why I mentioned that in my blog post is it puts a lot of pressure on things right away if that's the only source there. So keeping close connections with other people, being sure to have FaceTime dates with your friends and with the people closest to you, so that you don't feel, you know, like dating apps are your only hope for curing that loneliness.
So you're saying that if I talk more with my family and friends, I'll be less desperate for connection and won't immediately jump at anyone who seems to like me. I don't know about this.
Yeah.
This seems dubious.
It feels suspicious, but I mean, I can't tell you how many conversations along just those lines I have when it comes to dating, particularly online dating. The importance of embracing sort of an abundant mindset, you know, of making sure that your needs are being met generally, so that you don't see any particular need as like ride or die.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to jump back on the phones here in just a moment, but I had one more question for you, Grace, because I know that online dating, we're all in this place right now where we kind of have like nothing but time to swipe. And it can feel, you know, at the best of times, really overwhelming. I mean, particularly if you're a woman on an online dating platform, the reality is that you're going to be deluged with messages oftentimes, and it can feel a little bit like one of those Brazilian steakhouses where they just like keep coming by with like plates and plates of meat just all laid out there. You can just keep taking everything that you want. until you like have the wisdom to flip your card over. So you talk in your blog about the importance of taking breaks. You know it's the best metaphor ever. Come on.
I have never been to a Brazilian steakhouse, I
Oh,
guess, but now
no.
I really want to.
Oh, they're all like handsome men just like coming up right to your table and with the sticks of meat, and they're like, "Here, would you like this?"
Yeah, they just keep coming over and saying, "You want some more meat? You want some more meat?" It's
Wow.
it's a lot like Tinder. It's a lot like Tinder.
It is.
But how do people know when to take a break, or what does a break even look like? I mean, does that just mean no swiping after 9 p.m. or does that mean how does that look for different people?
Yeah. Well, I think noticing when you're totally burnt out on it, that can look like every message that you get, you're like, ugh, another person asking me what I do for work. Another person asking me what kind of music I listen to. And if you're just in that spot where you don't even want to answer those questions anymore, you probably need a break from dating. If you're in a spot where every single person that comes up and you're looking at your profile or you're looking at their portfolio, you're like, no. Zac Efron could be right there and you'd be like, ugh, no. You probably need a break from dating.
Probably. If you're turning down Zac Efron.
Yeah, right? and especially because we're talking about Zac Efron right now, and we all have a different picture in our head of what Zac Efron looks like. There's a Zac Efron for everybody. So if you're passing up your specific Zac Efron, it's a good time to take a break from dating. You heard it here first.
6 degrees of Zac Efron.
Yeah. And that might look like really deleting all of the apps. It might I think that can look different for everyone. It might just be taking a few days. It might mean taking a few months. But when you can come back to it and you feel comfortable starting those new conversations again, which, I think everybody's different with that and everybody has their different levels of extroversion. But for me, those initial conversations take a lot of energy. So just giving myself time to replenish and not feel that pressure to respond and, keeping in mind that you don't have to respond to anyone. You don't owe these people anything. They're just trying to date, and wait until you're ready to try and date again too before you try and talk to them, because it's not going to go well if you're in this place where you're just like, I'm so tired of answering every single question.
No, that doesn't make for a good date. No.
Yeah, it's a fair point that you don't owe it anything to these strangers that you haven't promised them. But if you are promising a date, there's some level of obligation to show up for it, or to at least be checking in with yourself and being responsible about the commitments you take on, or the promises that you make.
Sure.
Well, Sarah, who do you have on the phones for us next?
We've got Steve from Arizona. Steve, hello. Can you hear us?
I can.
Hello. Welcome.
Hi. Hey, I'm 58 years old. I was raised Mormon, really, really extreme version. You just talked about mothers. I had a shitty relationship with my mother. My dad was always gone doing church stuff, and my mom physically beat us on most days. So anyway, for the first 55 years, I was stuck in that. I was married for most of that time. I don't have any real dating experience. I made out with a couple of people before I got married at 25, and I've been married for 33 years, separated now for a year and a half. But I'm just like 2 years out of being an ultra conservative, and now I'm kind of a new hippie kind of person, feeling good about my life in general. But my sexuality is something that I've never explored because I didn't feel allowed to, I guess, and expected to marry and to raise kids and to do that young and all of that stuff. And I've got 2 kids. one of them is trans, non-binary, and the other one, and the other's younger son. But they're out of the house and raised, and so I don't know what I don't know how to start.
Sure. Well, let me just ask you this. I mean, we can talk about, well, let me ask you this. We can talk about, how to like understand your own kinks or how to explore your own gender or these different kinds of things. But when you talk about exploring your sexuality, what I'm really interested in is, where are you hoping to go, or where would you like to end up? Are you thinking that you want to date? Are you thinking that you're asking, what kinds of questions are you asking?
Well, I'd like to date, but I'd like to have another relationship. I've, like I say, 2 years out of being really conservative. I retired at the end of February, just in time for lockdown.
Sure.
And so, but I kind of don't know whether I'm kind of demisexual or whether I just have huge amounts of religious guilt involved, to where I feel like, a relationship is the only place for sex, But
Why not?
But I don't. Well, yeah, I just don't picture myself being physical with anybody. I mean, I watch porn. I'm attracted to, different people and whatever, and masturbation and things aren't a problem, isn't an obstacle, but I just don't, I don't understand, I don't see myself physically with somebody, and it's extra hard just to get out and be friends and be in a circle of people,
Yeah. Am I correct in understanding, though, that while you struggle to see yourself that way, that you aspire to being in a relationship? I mean, I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yes. Yeah. I'd like to travel and do some different things, but it's, I don't want to live alone. I'd like to share that with somebody. So, in a relationship would be, the end goal, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I hear you describing it as sort of the ultimate goal, and I respect that, and I don't want to knock it. This is something I try to say as often as possible, really. So forgive for repeating myself, but I want to make sure you know that you don't need to achieve anything or hit any milestones or accomplish anything specific before you're allowed to date. We like to highlight the fact that the whole idea that you need to learn to love yourself before someone else can it's bullshit. Yes, self-acceptance and self-compassion are really beautiful traits that will only serve you well and that will benefit your relationships in beautiful and meaningful ways. Yes, if you are dealing with like some specific stressors or processing like a particular bit of grief or some other moment, then take your time with that. But if you feel like you want to date, your best idea, your best habit is probably to start dating. How does that strike you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't end up in a relationship unless you're interacting with people and stuff. And
you get better at dating and better at being in a relationship, oftentimes by being in a relationship. I mean, I'm a much better boyfriend to my partner now than I was when we first met. And I am honestly a better partner to her than to many of the people I've been with in the past, because I'm growing, because I'm learning as a person. And this relationship is a big part of that for me.
And honestly, if you don't do it, you're going to be less wanting to start. I've been holding for so long, I can hold a little longer, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's like
harder and harder to break the seal.
It's like when they taught you to swim. They're not going to have you like tiptoe into the shallow pool. They're going to get in there, because otherwise you're just going to stay at the shallows.
And it's okay to
Yeah.
go slowly to, and to not put too much pressure on the discomfort around sex, to just be upfront with people and say, hey, I want to take things slow, and to see where things go from there.
Yeah, I don't know who I want to date. I guess that's the biggest thing. I mean, my wife is I don't know. We were married together for 32 years. We're separated now for about a year and a half. The last decade of that was pretty sparse as far as anything physical went.
Mm-hmm.
We're good friends and everything. But I mean, I'm attracted to men. I'm attracted to women, but I don't know who I actually want to be,
Yeah, and that's okay not to know. I mean, I think that everybody who starts to date doesn't know who they want to date. It's occasionally the truth that you have that, incredible coworker that you can't get out of your head. But more often than not, we're all just sort of casting out feelers, and then you take that first date, and you give it a try and you see how it goes. It's one of the things I love about online dating, even before all of this, is just the fact that the barrier to entry on a first date is pretty low. And especially now that, a FaceTime date or whatever else is a easy alternative, you may find that you can have 5 different types of dates in the same week and be able to sort of pick between them and sort out, who am I looking for? Who did I enjoy talking? What age range? What adjectives? What demographic? What gender? Whatever else.
Yeah, you don't need to pre-categorize.
Wonderful. I live in a county with about 30,000 people in it, and it's very conservative. So since I'm not that anymore, there's not a big pool of liberal-minded, free-thinking kinds of people. So it's a little limited as far as the options. If I lived in a bigger city, I suppose that'd be easier. But
yeah, Sarah, I feel like this comes up every time we have you on the show.
I think so.
And like I'm right there with you. Like I'm certainly, Steve, not telling you, oh, well, you need to move. Like I'm not going to come in as a stranger on the internet and try to dictate your life to you. But I do like to highlight that as an option, because I think so often it's overwhelming to the point where people are so intimidated by it that they just avoid it and they don't want to think about it, even though it could be the right choice for them.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's kind of a poison pool where I live. It's a very small community, and people know me a certain way. And not that anymore, and
Yeah, I mean, when I came out as queer and poly, it was while I was living in Austin, and it was at that moment that I was like, okay, I need to basically commit to Austin, because there's no going back to some of the other parts of Texas that I would be from, when those identities are becoming more and more forefront in the way I present to the world.
Yeah.
Well, moving is tough and stressful, but staying in somewhere that is just sort of slowly poisoning you emotionally long term is a bit worse, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's kind of a backwater as far as okay, well, I guess I'll just find out.
So you called in with a small problem, and I think we just gave you a big problem. But I do appreciate you reaching out.
I just also I'm for the first time in my life open to the idea of maybe dating men, but I also don't want to be seen as I don't want to be a tourist or something, or come across that way to people, and because I don't know if there's any potential there, So.
Well, Grace has said it a couple of times tonight, and I think it just comes down to letting people know. You don't necessarily have to broadcast at the front of your Grindr page that you've never been on a date with a man, but it's Grindr, so that would actually work out really well for you if you wanted to try it. If we're talking about Tinder or OkCupid or any of these other platforms, I do think that, you can put on a little bit of showmanship and not necessarily say all of these things while still being genuine and honest. And if you're being open and honest with the people you're interacting with, I don't know that you owe it to them to have any particular experience or any particular background.
Okay. I guess they're just exploring what's out there too. So
Yeah. And a lot of them like to explore people who are new to the community.
True.
I mean, that's a very broad and general statement, but yeah, it's probably very true on Grindr in particular. So good luck, be safe, and I appreciate you giving us a call.
well, thank you. Appreciate your help.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thanks, Steve.
Good luck.
All right. Did you have anybody else for us?
I got one more for us.
Great. Let's do it.
Yeah, this is Ben from Texas. Ben,
All right.
hello. Ben. Benny boy.
All right. Well, we'll hop Ben back into the queue and see if we can get that sorted out. Yeah. So we were just talking about, knowing when to take a break. And, we're kind of circling this in a lot of ways, but I guess I'm wondering, what are some good guidelines for knowing that dating is taking up like the right amount of space in your life? As you are dividing up your energies, it's really, really hard to know how much free time you even have when you're like living at home.
Sure. Yeah, there's an exercise that I really like where you divide the amount of time that you spend on different things into a pie chart. And you can do the same thing with your values. You divide those into a pie chart. And ideally, you want those to look similar. So that the amount of value that you put on romantic relationships is correlated with the amount of time that you're spending pursuing romantic relationships. And that's going to look different for everyone, and that's okay. It's just a matter of matching your own priorities. If you really value your friendships, but you're spending 90% of your free time swiping through Tinder, those friends might feel neglected, and you're going to feel out of sorts because you're not spending your time in a way that's congruent with your values.
Mm-hmm. Well, how do you know when you are out of sync? I mean, what are some of the warning signs for when your reality doesn't line up with your ideal pie chart or your ideal investment?
Hold on, I need to take notes on this to make sure.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
This is a place where all of the poly folks in the audience are like with rapt attention.
Warning signs might be a sense of anxiety, a sense of resentment as you're going through and swiping, feeling resentful that it's taking up too much of your time. That's definitely an indicator that, okay, so let's shift things so that it's not taking up as much as your time. Personally, I'm a huge fan of, on the iPhone, you can set limits on apps of how much time you spend on them. And you can also go back and look at the end of the week or at the end of the day at how much time you spent on all of these different things. So
life is hard enough without that kind of self-judgment in my life.
It can absolutely turn to judgment really easily. And it can also be nice to say, okay, well, I'm going to spend 30 minutes a day on dating apps, and that's it. And allowing yourself
I think there's a lot of value in that.
that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Or
I
an
actually
hour,
had never heard that strategy. I like that.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I have time limits for a lot of the different apps that I use, and you can always ignore them. If in the moment you're like, no, I'm having a great conversation.
This is somebody I need to text with. Yeah.
Yeah, then you can ignore those limits and continue.
Right.
But it's a good little reminder of like, hey, this is the amount of time that you said you wanted to spend, and you've spent it. And sometimes it just needs that little push where it's like, oh yeah, I can set my phone down and do something a little bit different.
Establishing a baseline of your activity.
Yeah, and nourishing yourself in a different way when you need to.
Sucked into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a meat market. It's a Brazilian steakhouse.
It is. We've
Well,
got Ben now, if you want to talk to
yeah,
him.
absolutely. Let's jump right back in.
All right.
How's it going? Hello. Thanks for taking the call. I have a question for a friend of mine who has younger people in their family, and the younger people are asking about dating advice. And I'm not talking about jumping on a Grindr profile or anything. I'm just talking about organically. Where can younger people go and seek out a good match for them?
How young?
Let's go under 18.
Yeah, so most of these dating apps, I believe, actually do have that 18-year-old cutoff. And with like high schools and everything else being online, that's a really difficult question. Grace, do you have any insights?
My first instinct is Instagram. I mean, sliding into the DMs.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad point. Really, any way that people are interacting, you know, if you're online and if you're online being social, you have a network of potential daters. I don't know. Is there a way, I guess, especially when you're young, to navigate those boundaries without coming across as a creep by just, you know, dropping into somebody's DMs?
You know, the kids these days know about it. They got their TikToks and their Snapchats and
Yeah, I have to acknowledge how out of touch we all are when it comes to like high school dating for the modern era.
I never figured out dating when I was in high school.
No.
So
Yep, nope, that's fair.
What about for people, let's say age older, let's say 25?
Yeah, I think these are the folks that are jumping onto dating apps, and I really, even before all of this, I've always been a big fan of online dating. I think that there's a lot of opportunities, and I know that it doesn't fit well for everybody, but I think it can be a great way to learn about yourself. You can discover your sexuality by having these sort of low-cost interactions, these opportunities to date people in a very casual way before making a commitment and meeting all kinds of different people that are outside of your friend group, of your worldview, of your circumstances. Beyond that, you know, I'm aware that there are still a lot of online meetup groups and things like that, but that all feels pretty thin. Do either of you have anything to recommend for folks in their like early 20s?
I would definitely say don't be afraid to date different dating apps, to try out different apps and see what you think about them, because there are so many. I was looking up the other day just to get an idea of, you know, if there were a bunch of them that I had never heard of, because I feel like I usually hear the same few, you know, Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, OkCupid are kind of ones that come up a lot, but there are way more than that. So, you know, and they're all different. They all have unique things about them, and they all draw kind of a different crowd too. And there's definitely some overlap, and sometimes you will see the same people on several different dating apps, but they all have their quirks. And so just being willing to try different dating apps and see which one feels right for you.
when
Cool.
I'm talking to people.
Is there a quick like a checklist you can give to know when you're ready for dating? Like, would seeing a therapist to go over any issues you might have to not take into a relationship be a good option for you? Like, what would you say to get prepped to really be good to go?
You'll never go on a date if you try that. That's just there's.
Well, you know, like we said, like good to go or ready enough is kind of a difficult thing because we want to encourage people to not put too many barriers in front of themselves. That being said, there's, you know, it's important to be smart about when or who or how or just how much to date. What kinds of I guess checklists or thoughts do y'all have?
I'm thinking, you know, if you notice that you're getting into the same pattern again and again in relationships, that might be a good time to see a therapist and to talk about those things and understand those patterns if you would like to not repeat that again. That's the only thought I have as far as the checklist goes.
I mean, I like the idea, of being ready, because how many times have women been free therapy for men? But
Yeah. No, that's a really fair point. My office is full of people, particularly women, who are there because the people they're dating, particularly men, aren't willing to go into a therapist office. And so, yeah, that's a very real dynamic we've created. But in terms of like when to see a therapist, I think the answer is always whenever you want. And what I mean by that is if you are considering it, listen to your instincts. A therapist can help you at any stage of life, whether we're talking about you've never dated and you're just feeling anxious about how to go through the process. Maybe you've been dating and you want to change some habits. Maybe you feel confident about where you're going, but this is important to you. And so you want to step up your game a little bit emotionally and just increase your kind of overall wisdom in your approach to it. But at the same time, if you're in any of those three situations and you don't have the space in your life, you're not looking for change, you're happy with where things are, that's okay too. And I don't know that anybody in those situations needs a therapist. I think the better question is, are you looking to change something about yourself? And if the answer to that question is yes, a therapist can help you change. That's what they're there for. Not to help you get a date or to help you, change in those kinds of ways, change your circumstances, but to change yourself. And if you feel like changing yourself is going to be the right thing to do, jump on it.
Yeah, I feel like we've got a sort of a dynamic where people go through their lives without having someone really close that they can talk to. And then when they get close to someone, suddenly, well, this is where all of my issues go, because this is the only person that I am comfortable sharing them with. Whereas if you would have someone, whether that be a therapist or like a really good friendship or something like that, that you can rely on, parent or something like that, for people who have parents, then you get away from that. You don't have to I'd say burden, you don't have to lay everything onto that one person.
Yeah. I wish there was some sort of solid checklist of, hey, do all of these things and then you'll be ready to be in a relationship. I wish that some of the people I've dated went through that checklist.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair.
Yeah. But, there's really not. And with the therapy thing, I think it's also, Christy, you mentioned kind of trusting your instincts. And that can be kind of tricky because a lot of people's instinct when it comes to therapy is, I don't need therapy. I don't need to talk about my emotions ever with anyone or acknowledge them. And so if that's your instinct, is this kind of gut reaction of therapy is for insert whatever here, weak people or whoever it might be, take a moment to kind of look at that too. Everybody has feelings. Every human being has feelings. And when we don't talk about them, research shows that they get bigger and bigger and they cause more and more behavior changes in us that we don't want to happen. So, looking at that with yourself too and asking yourself what therapy means to you, what kind of preconceived ideas you have about therapy that came from our society and our culture.
Mm-hmm. I hope that gives you some direction, Ben. I mean, is there anything else that still feels kind of lingering?
No, that sounds good. Great advice. I appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks so much for giving us a call. Take care. Well, Grace, I've already mentioned your blog, which is already in the show notes to this episode. Whether you're catching us on YouTube or listening to the podcast later, we'll make sure to have links to that. Are there any other resources that you want to recommend for people who are just really wanting to go on a date right now?
Yeah. As far as other resources go, there's so many great books out there about dating and exploring dating. One of my favorites is How to Be an Adult in Relationships. And it's not COVID related because, we don't have a whole lot of COVID related dating materials out there just yet. And I'm really hoping we don't have to because this will be over eventually one day.
Yeah, let's wrap it up before it gets to the publishers. Everybody, please and thank you.
Right. But there's a lot of really great books about dating, and this is a great time to check them out. So How to Be an Adult in Relationships is great if it's more directed towards hetero, which I don't love, but it's got a lot of tips about mindfulness and stuff in there that are cool. And there's a book called Attached about attachment theory. I enjoyed that one. And Christy, you probably know a lot of them too. But I think, just kind of examining dating in general on your own, looking inwards to your own stuff. This is a great time to do it.
In normal times, I tend to direct people to, social events and social groups and stuff like that. And it's worth pointing out, I think, that there is such a thing as that on the internet, and it can lead to dating. I met one of my girlfriends on a fan fiction bulletin board, so
that's very on brand. I love that, Serafina. But it's a good point because we are in this place where our relationships are strained in a number of ways, and whether you're like actually out looking for a date or just trying to, like we talked about earlier, be supported in these other ways. I want to really encourage people after, 6 months of fatigue to keep doing your Skype dates with your friends, to be still having coffee with people online, to be, doing your Netflix parties or whatever we were excited about back in April or May to give a try to cut through the boredom. This thing is still going on and it's still weighing on each of us. So to spend a little bit of time addressing that and making sure you're still connected to humans feels really important right now.
Absolutely. Everybody was so good those first few weeks of coming up with all these new hobbies and baking bread and doing puzzles.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of dropped off, and so I've been noticing that in myself and in my friends too, of like, hey, we still need to do these things. Our situation has not changed. Still need to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I hope that everybody out there is staying grounded. I want to again say that we've got your blog listed in the show notes to this episode, as well as some of the books and the resources that you recommended. I'll make sure that all of that gets updated, but people can also find you on Facebook and Instagram. You're at gracewoodtherapy.com, where that blog and everything else is available. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that, whether you are having that visceral reaction about a therapist or whether you do feel like this is time to maybe examine yourself, that there are great professionals like you out there and available.
Thanks, Christy.
So thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on and for talking about all this with us. I, of course, want to make sure to thank our incredible crew who has helped us put all this together. Dealing with all of our technical issues and all of the stress of this. Thank you all so much for going through the calls and everything else. We so appreciate just the work that y'all do.
Hashtag crewcat.
Hashtag crewcat, goddamn. And of course, Grace is on Facebook and Instagram. So is Secular Sexuality. We're on Twitter at Secular Sex. We have our new Secular Sexuality fan group that's been put on by some incredible fans out in the audience who are just excited to connect and form more of that community that we're talking about. This is a time to be leaning into things like the ACA Discord and some of these Facebook fan groups. And, as silly as it sounds, there's a lot of value and a lot of connection in those communities. So I hope that everybody is getting out and enjoying those things. And, beyond that, guys, I think that's pretty much it for me, other than, just to remind everybody to, whether they're stuck at home alone or, perhaps having a FaceTime date or, whatever your situation is, to go out and give yourself a big old orgasm. Or better yet, give somebody else one.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?